Crypto gaming is actually a tough one. There's been a handful of games like Axie Infinity. Then you have some of the games on Solana. Try to come into the centerfold, things like Decentraland and these metaverses come in, and they don't really have that much adoption. Although some of the assets can be worth 6 or 7 figures, I do think it's probably more likely, unless Yuga Labs and other side comes in and really hits a nail on the head and really has an impactful message and introduction with the other side. It's probably more likely that you're going to see a Web2 company come in, like probably Roblox would be like my lead candidate to come in and introduce NFTs into their platform, and then try to take those assets and profit or monetize them in a way that their creators of Roblox are then allowed to take it outside of Roblox into these other games. And I think once that does happen, then you'll probably see just a complete landslide of people rushing for the door, trying to have NFTs in their system.
Hi, everyone. Today we have an esteemed guest, Jake. Can you introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks. First, thanks for having me, Hassan. I really appreciate it. Anytime I get to talk with a fellow person in the crypto space, man, it's really, really exciting. As you know, my name is Jake Gallen. I live out here in Las Vegas. I've been in the crypto space pretty active almost every day since late 2016. I work over at Emblem Vault. I work on product and strategy. Also, I'm a core contributor at a new protocol on Bitcoin ordinals called Omniset, as well as a host of my own podcast called the Jake Gallen's Guest List. Have been pretty much all over the space, everything from selling NFTs at Sotheby's auction house to building different types of protocols to the absolute degen trader that most of us begin with. Been really, really all over the space over the last 7 to 8 years.
Perfect. So you see like a lot of topics like people hear about the metaverse and NFTs. These topics were very hot, but right now maybe it's not as focused on. So do you think this like will like have a comeback and this maybe next bull run, or what do you think is like its current state right now?
About just NFTs in general?
Yeah, like for example, NFTs in general and digital collectibles. Like, what do you think the current state of this space, industry, and also the market?
I mean, NFTs are an emerging asset class outside of just what typical users believe as PFPs, right? Like Bored Apes and CryptoPunks. Yes, that could be art and collectibles and tradable assets, but NFTs represent a much larger asset class and market in terms of real world assets, gamification, digital real estate, yield bearing assets. The list goes on, and this is only going to continue to grow. I think the majority of NFTs in terms of value from 2021 probably will not reach their all-time high. You will have some probably like Bored Apes and CryptoPunks and some of the historical NFTs will definitely get back to their all-time highs. But I think it's time to kind of look past the value of these things and look at the explosion of innovation in the technology that represents them. And now NFTs are even more so moving outside of Ethereum and have begun to explode on Solana. And obviously this year, at the beginning of 2024 in January, Bitcoin ordinals and the now 10 or so different meta protocols that exist with the invention or creation or discovery, depending on who you are, of inscriptions.
Perfect. So you think is it going to go more into the direction of tokenization of physical assets or collectibles, or is it going to continue on to the digital creations and stuff like that in terms of like the in this next phase?
Both, to be honest. Crypto was built on gambling. Let's be honest. The original means of it was to have self-sovereignty over your finance and over your personal value. That's what Satoshi discusses, right, on the Chancellor of the Brink of bailouts. But the real first use case of Bitcoin was gambling, like Satoshi Dice in 2011. And I think the degeneracy and, the on-chain casinos that keep evolving, that's not going to go away. That's inherently part of human nature. I'm born and raised out here in Las Vegas, where I'm recording, where I'm sitting here recording. And Vegas is exactly the same exact thing as crypto. There will always be an introduction of different type of mechanisms of how you go about gambling or investing, right? Like the quote is, if you bet on something and you win, it's investing. But if you bet on something and lose, it's considered gambling. I think crypto kind of represents that pretty well. So you will see, more PFPs, you'll see more digital art that trades at astronomical values. That doesn't really make sense, right? A lot of that's just really built into the nature of crypto. But you do have this emerging segment of real world assets, bringing bonds on chain, bringing different types of traditional money markets on chain, bringing Pokemon cards on chain, bringing baseball cards, bringing, I get like FTX claims are now on chain. Like everything that exists in the real world can be tokenized on chain, but the means at which that value is either traded or imported or exported through the blockchain, I think is something to pay attention to.
So you think that maybe because you mentioned, like, for example, FTX claims and maybe some other utilities, like, for example, tokenization of physical assets. So you think that the utility will take hold at some point, or it will continue on to be this selling at like maybe extraordinary prices for the art? Is it going to like maybe shift more towards the utility, like let's say selling concert tickets or something like that?
I would say you're probably going to have both. You're really not going to escape just the advent of people who are going to want to trade and speculate. You cannot speculation will never leave crypto. I think at a time if speculation ever left crypto, that'd be the time that it probably disappears or has finally hit market saturation. But at that point, the entire crypto, if that comes and speculation's gone, then crypto's probably consumed the majority of traditional finance, which I don't think is actually going to happen. I think they'll probably run in parallel more likely than it is to crypto to consume them because governments really have an issue with letting some of their power and control lose it to the communities. But there are innovators out there, and being able to unlock literally billions or even trillions of dollars through the introduction of different types of utility to the blockchain is what a lot of builders are focusing on, right? I work at Emblem Vault, and this is something that we're focused on right now. We allow users the ability to trade assets across chains. It's the leading cross-chain NFT protocol that has close to 100 million in TVL across 12 different blockchains. But even through our means, we haven't introduced this yet, but in theory, you can embed any type of Web2 digital asset there, whether it's like a .com domain or a .io domain or a Twitter handle. You can do these kind of things, and that is also an RWA, although it's not quote unquote real world like Web1, right? Just the physical asset world. It is a traditional asset in terms of the internet. And I think a lot of that kind of gets lost when people think of real world assets, which is actually a pretty bad name for that. They think of, something that you could physically touch, but we're moving into a more digital world to where the focus should be bringing on either physical assets or representations of physical assets or just purely digital assets to the chain, and then find out how you can embed that into these different types of DeFi protocols, NFTFi, which is NFT finance protocols, metaverse gaming products, etc. The vision of a multi-chain future and a cross-chain future is something that I wholeheartedly believe. I mean, I'm dedicating my life to really build that at this point in time. And right at the heart of that and multi-chain is real world assets and the utility of NFTs that also has a foundation of speculation.
So you think that moving forward, it would be more like the creators in general, or like the real assets, like digital assets being created, is more going to be on Web3, not like Web 2.0?
I mean, it really depends on what you're looking for. I think the majority of art, as we move forward, probably 10 years from now, the majority of it will probably be through a digital lens, whether it's through NFTs or whatever the next evolution of tokenized non-fungibility is on chains. But when you look at the younger generations, I'm a millennial, but even Gen Z and then the alpha generation, they're spending increasingly 8+ hours per day on their devices, whether it's a laptop, an iPad, a cell phone, or iPhone, etc. And so if you look at like this, then of course the proliferation of digital assets is only going to increase because they're spending more money on Roblox skins, right? Or they're spending more money on whatever Diablo currency is they're playing, or right, whatever Fortnite game that they want or whatever they're building, they're continually spending. Eventually, they will come to the understanding that you don't actually own those assets and that on a public ledger, you will be able to, which is the code of NFTs. But NFTs did really get a little bit of a bad stain through trading monkey pictures for 500K and, Paris Hilton and Jimmy Fallon shilling it on, the late night show to the quote unquote, the normal population who doesn't really understand this stuff. But it's going to take a little bit. I think also the invention, or just, I guess you say, the exponential increase in AI and the way that, large language models and some of these other creator tooling is created to make it easier. That'll probably have an intersection with crypto at some point in the future to where interacting with blockchains is probably going to be much easier than it is today because the user experience, I'm sure you're familiar, is just absolutely horrendous.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. So do you think in the future maybe that these gaming companies, instead of having their own, like let's say in-house skins that they centrally control, they maybe there will be like maybe a central hub for these bridges maybe between games and also between different platforms that's on chain. So basically users will be able to own these assets. Do you think maybe this is like something that could happen?
Crypto gaming is actually a tough one. There's been a handful of games like Axie Infinity. Then you have some of the games on Solana. Try to come into the centerfold, things like Decentraland and these metaverses come in, and they don't really have that much adoption. Although some of the assets can be worth 6 or 7 figures, I do think it's probably more likely, unless Yuga Labs and other side comes in and really hits a nail on the head and really has an impactful message and introduction with the other side. It's probably more likely that you're going to see a Web2 company come in, like probably Roblox would be like my lead candidate to come in and introduce NFTs into their platform and then try to take those assets and profit or monetize them in a way that their creators of Roblox are then allowed to take it outside of Roblox into these other games. And I think once that does happen, then you'll probably see just a complete landslide of people rushing for the door, trying to have NFTs in their system. It's very similar like today. Today, at the time of recording, is when the Bitcoin ETF started trading for the first day. It tripled the highest opening for an ETF ever. Gold was 1.6 billion its first day of trading. Today, I think it was $4.7 billion. You'll likely see something similar to that happen with NFTs whenever these major gaming companies, these 3-star companies, GTA, there's also speculation GTA is going to have either cryptocurrency or NFTs enabled into GTA 6. Whenever that moment does come, you'll see a very, very huge rush for NFTs and crypto in their gaming ecosystems.
So what do you think would be the, like you mentioned before earlier that Ethereum is already is not maybe the go-to anymore or like the main go-to or the only thing. So what do you think is like maybe the future Ethereum or like the future best blockchain for NFTs and digital collectibles?
Again, it depends on what NFTs that you're doing. If we're sticking just to this just to this topic of gaming NFTs, you're going to need a low fee environment. So probably Solana would be my leading candidate. Then second leading candidate would be one of these Ethereum layer 2s, whether it's Optimism, Arbitrum, or Polygon, ZK Sync Base, right? You have those kind of 5 leading candidates.
I think maybe for art, maybe it will stay on Ethereum because it's like usually like maybe selling for higher amounts.
Yeah, exactly. You're right. So Bitcoin and Ethereum are going to persist as being these high value chains. And if you're going to opt for the highest degree of decentralization and security, those are the 2 leading chains that you want in terms of assets or in terms of smart contract performance. And so with Ethereum, scaling can improve. Vitalik's already addressed it pretty recently. It will improve, but there's still a limit to where it can go. And I know Vitalik's been, trying to be a proponent recently of trying to move Ethereum past decentralized finance and more towards like social identity and some of these other attributes. I think it's going to be really, really hard for him to completely move that away. To me, Ethereum is going to be more of just this decentralized finance platform. And Bitcoin now with ordinals, we are seeing some gaming happening over there with the proliferation of inscriptions. But a dark horse candidate I'll give you for crypto gaming actually is Dogecoin, is one that I'll throw in the hat with the rise of Doginals in DRC20, which is an ecosystem I participate in. Dogecoin, I recently watched with Doginals have 4,000 transactions in a single block, which is 1 minute, right? So if you're doing 4,000 transactions in 1 minute, that's still not going to be what gaming needs. Gaming is probably like with Grand Theft Auto. If you have, 10 to 100 million people actively playing this, you're going to need tens of thousands of transactions per second. And this is why I believe Solana is probably the leading candidate. But ultimately, gamers are going to find whatever ecosystem matches their strengths and whichever makes them feel comfortable. So they're going to have a pretty large selection, but it's still probably years away, from my opinion.
Okay, so how about you mentioned like maybe there is like some bridges for NFTs between chains. So I would understand like how a bridge works for fungible assets, like for example for the coin tokens themselves. But for non-fungible assets, how does this work? Like to move between bridge like between blockchains for the assets.
So the classification of this is actually called interoperability protocols. So again, Emblem Vault, the company I work at, we're one of these. There's three mechanisms to move assets across chains. There's something called bridges, there's something called the wraps, and then there's something called vaults. Bridges came to the scene first in 2019. Bridges have this mechanism. It's called lock and mint, where let's say I want to send a Bitcoin asset to Ethereum. Again, right? This is just for an example. Actually, a better example would be sending Ethereum assets to Solana. You're going to lock the ETH on one side and then mint another token on the other. And then whenever you want to redeem that original asset, you have to burn it. Wraps are a form of custodial tokenization. So like, for example, the most popular wrap technology is WBTC, which has about $4 billion in TVL. Basically, what you're doing is you're sending Bitcoin to BitGo, I believe is a custodian. Then they're just minting a WBTC token on the other side. And whenever you want to get your original Bitcoin back, you have to burn it and go through the whole custodial thing. And then Emblem Vault, which is the leading NFT like bridge. It's not exactly a bridge, but it is an interoperability protocol. What it is I call it an encryptment, where you send an asset to a wallet. For example, here, Emblem Vault has facilitated up until Bitcoin Ordinals about 80% of Bitcoin NFT volume ever. Now it's much lower with the rise of Ordinals and just the native ecosystems have improved. You basically are taking the private key to this wallet that owns these Bitcoin NFTs, and then you're encrypting it and storing it on chain, for example, for Ethereum. So our largest collection that we house or have the largest TVL, which is probably over $50 million in TVL, is Rare Pepe. Rare Pepe is one of the, I would say either second or third most valuable NFT collection across any blockchain. Basically, what you're doing, if you have a Nakamoto card, which the current valuation of those are around like $150,000 to $200,000, you're sending a Nakamoto card into a Bitcoin wallet. Then we take that private key and seed phrase to that wallet, encrypt it in a way that it's stored on chain. And whenever you want to take so then you have an NFT on the other side that hold the private key to those assets. And if you ever wanted to take that Rare Pepe back to Bitcoin, you basically burn that NFT and then it shows you the seed phrase to the wallet that owns that Rare Pepe. So there's three types of ways to move assets between chains right now. Obviously, bridge is more dominated by fungible tokens. It's actually mostly 99% fungible tokens. You have wrapped, which is also fungible tokens, but it's mostly just Bitcoin. And then you have Emblem Vault that does vaulting, which is all, or I'd say 99% right now, NFTs. And these are the three ways, at least from my knowledge, to move assets across chain.
So the last method you mentioned, when it encrypts the seed phrase and the keys, do it like using a centralized system or like using a smart contract? How does it work?
I would say it's like semi-centralized. So we use Web3 auth, which is a key management type of software. So in short term, again, I'm not the developer. I'm the product and kind of leader type of the team. You take the private key and it does something that's called sharding, and it takes the key and shards it X amount of times. I think it's 5 different places, and stores those keys in 5 different locations. Could be more. And then when the user calls the contract function to burn those 5, quote unquote, that's the example, those 5 shards of keys are then pulled from the different places on chain, and then they form and fit the key together, and then it shows. And it's all done through open source smart contracting.
I see. Perfect. So up until now, like, what do you think is the most interesting NFT project that you came across, or maybe what is the one that you think that like has best prospect? Obviously, I'm not talking about the financial aspect. I'm just talking about like in terms of utility or maybe like being interesting overall.
So I mean, we've talked about multi-chain, cross-chain, and bridges and real-world assets. I would say are the 2 most interesting means of NFT type technologies that are on my mind. Outside of that, though, right? Because I'm biased here. Things like NFT lending are cool. I like to follow NFT finance, but more so finding crypto native financial protocols. And what I mean by this is, right, you have borrowing and lending has existed in the traditional world for centuries. Yield-bearing assets has existed for a long time. But things like NFT liquidity pools and, you know, some of these quote unquote Ponzi's that pop up, whether they're successful or not, I find really interesting. I'm just very deep in the infrastructure game. I now a co-founder or, you know, a core contributor to 2 emerging protocols that both deal with fungible assets and non-fungible assets and cross-chain. So anything infrastructure wise that's introduced, I really find interesting. If I want to be a kid and nostalgic, the tokenization of Pokemon cards through Courtyard. I've had them on my show before. I just find that fun because, you know, it really hits a soft spot. I was a big Pokemon collector when I was younger, but also as well, I used to own an antique store in real life. So when I got into NFTs in 2021, there's this proliferation of historical NFTs, which are just NFTs from 2017 and earlier, between Namecoin, Bitcoin, Dogecoin, and Ethereum. I like the idea of provenance. I think that one of the key features of NFTs is this idea of provenance. Like in the art world, when you sell something at Sotheby's, you have to have it appraised and valued and understand its legitimacy, right? You don't really know the exact time. It's all estimate and guesses. But with NFTs, you can see exactly to the second when it was created, where it was created, the ownership of or history of ownership, etc. And to me, that is one of the key features that makes NFTs vastly superior than most of the types of non-fungible assets that exist in the real world.
We saw a lot of NFTs maybe having the risk of, because we don't like, especially in the blockchain, like every space is very valuable. So sometimes maybe not the full NFTs is being there. Like let's say it's an image. So not the actual image file is there, it's just maybe a link. So you think in the future, maybe there will be like, because you mentioned Solana as well, and the fees are, they are very cheap. You think maybe we will see like more assets being housed on the blockchain, or it will remain maybe like in a decentralized system, like other protocols that maybe like decentralized storage? What do you see the direction going more into? Like obviously everything might continue to exist in parallel, but what do you think the direction that might be moving forward?
That's a good question, and it's actually happening right now. So you're just thinking to the idea of on-chain assets. On Ethereum, there are on-chain assets that exist. Mooncats are fully on-chain. CryptoPunks are fully on-chain. You know, there's a few dozen projects where the ownership layer and the data layer are both stored on-chain. These are the 2 mechanisms that are very important. What you're speaking on is, you know, a phenomenon that exists mostly on Ethereum, where the ownership layer, the token, exists on-chain, but the image and the data is stored off-chain with a pointer, and it's usually stored in IPFS or Arweave. On Bitcoin, with Bitcoin ordinals, it's actually flipped. The data is stored on Bitcoin, but the ownership layer is off-chain. So if you created an indexer right now, you could go and see all 53 million inscriptions on Bitcoin that are stored in the blockchain. But if you created your own indexer right now and didn't link up to anybody else, you'd have no idea who owns this shit, but the data is there. So, you know, finding where that happy medium is, I don't think there may be a handful of single assets that are stored completely on chain, but with Bitcoin, because it has this lack of smart contract functionality, it's going to be nearly impossible to have something fully on chain with the data layer and the storage layer. So really, it just depends on what your preference is. A lot of people are going to Bitcoin right now because they believe it's the most decentralized, and it is most likely, because of Lindy effect and some other types of phenomenon, to exist forever. So if you want to put something on chain and for it to exist forever, maybe it's an important document, some sort of life memento, right? Some sort of something. If you're a whistleblower and you want to put some sort of documentation online, you're probably going to go to Bitcoin so that anybody could go see it at any point in time. But if you want, more functionality and you want to add quote unquote utility to your NFTs, you're probably going to go to Ethereum, at least in its current climate. But both ecosystems, as well as Solana ecosystem as well, they're all really pushing towards on-chain. It's just being fully on-chain is much more expensive. Storing data on blockchains is very expensive. And also, if you're familiar with building on blockchains as well, the scalability is really tough. And so it really just depends on what you're doing. And it goes really back to the beginning of our conversation about where the direction of NFTs are going. And I say that's why speculation exists, because if you just want to speculate on stuff, you don't really need to store your images on chain, right? You're just trading based off of vibes, right? If you're a vibes trader. Whereas if it's something more important, you're going to have to pay a little bit more to ensure the integrity of that data exists forever.
Perfect. So where can people go to find you?
I mean, dude, I'm easy. Everything is under my real name, Jake Gallen, Jakegallen. You can find me on Twitter. That's where I'm most active, Jake Gallen _. You go to my YouTube channel, Jake Gallen, and I'm in Discord as well. You could really find me anywhere on Instagram. My podcast, Jake Gallen's Guest List. I host a show 3 times a week, Tuesday through Thursday at 11:30 a.m. Eastern time. But really, I am one of those people that's just terminally online. So if any of your listeners have any questions, just shoot me a DM on Twitter. It's the easiest way to get in contact with me.
Perfect. It was very amazing to have this conversation with you. And thanks for all the info and insight into the NFT world.
I appreciate it, man. Really, really honored to be here. You're a great host, and I look forward to following you along your journey.
Thank you.